The snow wind cut like knives, yet in a small cabin at the prairie's edge, Amara Bennett felt as if she had just stepped out of a life of bondage. Once used to velvet gowns and bright banquets in Boston, she now wore the rough shirt of a stranger. It hung only to her thighs, leaving bare the long legs once caged in lace and corset. The strange freedom of it made her tremble. The straw bed creaked hard and loud, yet held a warmth she had never known when he lay down, only an arm's reach away. They turned their backs, not touching, yet each breath wound itself into the thin space between them. In that darkness, Amara understood. This was not another chain, but warmth, the kind she had never tasted through all the years of silk and cold stares. In 1878, the Wyoming prairie wind screamed as if to tear the sky apart. Black clouds pressed low, so heavy they seemed within reach of a hand. Rain lashed straight across her face, each drop a needle piercing through thin cloth. On a road slick with mud and water, a lone rider urged her horse forward in despair. That was Amara Bennett. Her long dress clung heavy and soaked, dragging at her legs with every jolt of the saddle. Thick curls streamed loose, plastered against her cheeks and neck. Her hands, trembling yet unyielding, clutched the saddle horn, veins standing out against her dark skin. Breath tore in and out, her chest rising as though it might burst. Behind her, hundreds of miles to the east, lay Boston, the city of her birth in velvet and chandeliers, but also the prison of her youth. Her father, a cold banker, had forced her into becoming a living dowry, binding her to Albert Marchand, a magnate 30 years her elder. The man never saw her as flesh and blood, only as an ornament, a symbol to polish his rising name. "You have no choice, Amara." Her father's words had carried the weight of a sentence. The night before the wedding, while laughter still echoed from the banquet hall, Amara slipped away from the grand house with her mother's small inheritance, a cloth bag, and a train ticket west. Wyoming, a land said to be filled with danger, was, to her, the last hope of freedom. But now freedom felt like a death sentence. The horse she had bought in haste at Cheyenne wheezed and stumbled, hooves sliding in the muck. A bolt split the sky wide, white fire lighting the plains, followed by thunder so deep the ground shook. The horse reared, screaming, then pitched Amara into the storm. Her body struck the wet earth hard, her left shoulder slamming into stone, pain searing her numb. A cry tore from her throat, then only the sound of rain and the wind's fury remained. She tried to rise, but dizziness blurred her sight. In that haze, she glimpsed her horse vanish into the storm, carrying away her bag, her last scraps for survival. Amara dropped to her knees, fingers clawing mud. Cold sank deep into her bones. Her shoulder throbbed sharp, useless. Wet hair clung to her dirt-streaked face. Her heart hammered, fear flooding her veins. Ahead lay only dark, rain, and thunder. No tree, no roof, only the prairie, endless and devouring. A thought flickered. Perhaps death on this wild land was kinder than life in Boston's cage. Then came the sound of hooves, low, steady, distinct from the storm's roar. Amara stiffened, her heart knotted. A stranger in the storm. Was it a blessing, or a thief, or a drunk roaming the plains? Lightning flashed. It lit a tall figure on horseback. A broad-brimmed hat shadowed half his face, shoulders squared, back straight. The horse halted just paces away. A voice cut through the gale, deep and firm. "Are you hurt?" Amara flinched, stumbling back, nearly falling in the mud. Her body tensed, like a cornered animal. The man dismounted slow, deliberate, one hand raised as though to prove he bore no harm. The wind whipped his coat wide, rain glinting off strong shoulders. "I won't hurt you," he said, steady, without push. "I only mean to help." Amara bit hard on her lip. Boston had taught her too well. Men never gave without cost. But the storm's cold pierced bone. Her shoulder screamed. Her legs quivered weak. She knew, stand here, and she would not live the night. The man stepped closer, then stopped, leaving the choice to her. In the next strike of lightning, she caught his eyes beneath the hat, dark blue, steady, without threat. He held out his hand. It was broad, scarred, calloused from work. A hand that carried strength, but no force. For a moment, she remembered Albert Marchand's grip, cold and crushing, and her father's hand shoving her toward a fate she could not escape. This hand was different. Strong, but patient. Rain lashed her face, urging her on. Amara's breath came hard, her body trembling, and at last she lifted her hand. Her small, frozen fingers met his palm. His grip closed at once, firm yet gentle, catching a life slipping from the edge. "Hold tight," his voice rumbled. And in that heartbeat, amid the howling storm, Amara felt a spark of hope. Not from the heavens, not from freedom's dream, but from the solid grasp of a stranger's hand. That man, whose name she would later learn was Nathaniel Cole, became the line between her death and her life that night. The storm still raged as Nathaniel reined his horse toward a narrow, rocky trail. Water streamed down the slopes, rain whipping across his face. After a bend in the road, a cabin emerged through the dark, a rough-hewn shape of timber, standing firm as if it had weathered countless tempests. "We're here," Nathaniel said, his voice low, clipped. He swung down first, circling quick to steady Amara. She hesitated, uneasy at the touch of a stranger, yet the pain in her shoulder left her no choice. His hand was calloused, steady, neither harsh nor lingering, just enough to keep her upright on the sodden ground. The cabin door opened, and warmth rushed out like an unexpected embrace. Inside, the hearth glowed bright, flames snapping and sending up the thick scent of wood smoke. Outside, the storm roared on. Within, the world shrank to a circle of golden firelight. "You must change at once, or the cold will take you," Nathaniel said. His voice, roughened by wind, still carried a steadiness. He went to a chest in the corner, rummaged, and pulled out a thick flannel shirt. Pressing it into her hands, he said simply, "Mine." Too large but dry. Amara stared at the garment, astonished. In Boston she had known only silks, corsets, and lace. Never in her life had she wrapped herself in something so coarse. Yet now, it felt like salvation. Nathaniel cleared his throat, eyes sliding away. "Behind the partition there. I'll see to supper." Turning sharply, he busied himself at the stove, as if to sever the awkwardness. Amara stepped slowly behind the wooden screen. Her fingers trembled as she peeled the drenched fabric from her skin. The weight of it pulled at her sore shoulder, each tug sharp with pain. At last she shed the soaked dress, left shivering in thin linen. Gooseflesh prickled her arms. Slipping into the shirt, she felt the coarse weave, the scent of smoke and horse leather clinging to its fibers. It hung loose, falling to mid-thigh, hiding her form yet baring her long brown legs. Heat flushed her cheeks. Never before had she felt so unguarded before a man. Yet in the shame was a strange breath of freedom. No corset biting, no layers binding. When she stepped out, Nathaniel was bent at the hearth. His hat and coat lay aside, damp curls clinging at his neck, jaw shadowed with rough stubble. At the sound of her steps, he glanced back. For a moment, his eyes froze on her figure in the oversized shirt. Then, swift as a man burned, he turned away. "Are you warmer now?" he asked, his tone steady, forced. Amara clutched the shirt's collar, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathaniel set more wood on the fire, then laid out dried meat and cornbread. "Nothing fine, but it will fill." He placed the food on the rough table. No further words offered. Amara sat. The plain scents of smoke and bread rose around her, drowning the dampness in her hair. When Nathaniel slid a wooden bowl of thin soup before her, steam fogged the window panes. Her throat caught. Memory stirred. Boston tables draped in white linen, silver knives gleaming, porcelain trimmed in gold. Every word measured under her father's eye, every gesture weighed. Here, with a rough bowl and a battered spoon, inside a storm-lashed cabin, Amara felt she was tasting the best meal of her life. She sipped carefully, the warmth sinking deep, chasing the chill from her bones. Her vision blurred. Whether from smoke or something else, she could not tell. Nathaniel asked nothing. He sat opposite, silent, eating his share. Now and again his gaze flicked across, only to dart back to the fire, as though the flames might betray his thoughts. Amara caught him more than once. Each glance tugged her heart. It was not possession, not hunger, simply a quiet watchfulness, as if to assure himself she was safe. Her fingers tightened on the spoon. A strange tide rose within her. In all her years, no one had looked at her like that. In Boston, men's eyes held only calculation or desire. Here, in firelight, those quick, restrained glances made her feel seen, acknowledged as her own. When the meal ended, Amara moved to the hearth, stretching her hands to the blaze. The wide shirt wrapped her frame, smoke weaving around her like a cloak. Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe, his shadow stretching long across the walls. His deep-set eyes gazed into the rain beyond, his mouth tight, as though holding back words unsaid. In that small cabin, while the storm howled outside, Amara felt the space between herself and this man grow less fearsome. Never before, amid such a storm, had she known a peace like this. Outside, the storm still howled, rain lashing hard against the thin wooden walls as if it meant to tear the cabin apart. Each clap of thunder lit the room in sudden flashes, casting the sharp shadows of two strangers who now shared a fragile shelter. When the dishes were cleared, Nathaniel quietly spread an old wool blanket on the floor by the hearth. He set down a small pillow, his movements brisk, offering no explanation. Seeing Amara's faint frown, he spoke short and plain. "The bed is yours. I'll sleep here." Amara glanced toward the narrow bed in the corner. It was nothing fine, just a rough wooden frame with straw beneath a heavy quilt. Yet to her eyes, it was heaven compared to the mud and cold outside. The trouble was, the man who had pulled her from the storm now chose the hard floor, like a servant. "You should take the bed," she said, voice low but firm. "You're as wet as I am, and the floor will freeze you through." Nathaniel paused, then shook his head. "I'm used to it." Pulling the blanket around his shoulders, he seemed to end the matter. Amara stood still, clutching the oversized shirt at her chest. She had never been offered sacrifice. In Boston, she had only known command, arrangement, obedience. Yet somehow, the quiet resolve in Nathaniel's voice made her chest ache. "Then we can share," she whispered, heat rushing to her face. Nathaniel turned. Firelight caught the blue in his eyes. He held her gaze for a long silence, long enough for her to regret the words. But at last, he gave a small nod. No further debate, no fuss. He rose, crossed the room, and went to the bed. They lay down, each turned to a side. Between them lay a folded blanket, a narrow border of cloth that seemed a fragile boundary. Amara pulled the quilt to her shoulder. By chance, her back touched his. Her body stiffened, heart racing. His back was warm, solid, like a wall against the storm. His steady breath brushed her shoulder, blending with the wind outside. For the first time in her life, she lay beside a man without fear. No grasping hand, no possessive stare. Only quiet, shared warmth and the shape of a steady figure she was not forbidden to lean on. Tears welled unbidden, not from despair but from release. They slid down her cheek, soaking into the pillow, mingling with the warmth she felt at her back. She drew a slow breath, then, almost without thought, eased closer. Just a little. Nathaniel did not turn, but he did not move away. Their backs rested flush, heat passing between them. His heartbeat thudded slow, strong, a rhythm she felt through the muscle of his frame. Her own raced, stumbling to match. Amid the storm's fury, that pulse became the only sound she wished to hear. Thunder cracked, shaking the cabin. Amara flinched, clutching the quilt tight. Yet from the place where their bodies touched, warmth spread like a quiet assurance. She closed her eyes, letting herself be held by it. Boston had never given her this. There she had known only cold rooms, measured stairs, binding hands. Here, in a rough-hewn cabin, beside a man she had not known a full day, she felt safe. That night, Amara wept in truth, not from fear nor defeat, but because for the first time she was allowed to breathe, to be. And with the storm wailing outside, she drifted into sleep, her back pressed to his, her heart beating in time with Nathaniel's. By morning, the storm had broken. The sky spread wide and clean, so bright Amara had to narrow her eyes. The prairie stretched like a vast green rug. Rainwater still pooled in shining patches beneath the new sun. Nathaniel tightened the saddle cinch and said plain, "We ride to Red Willow. You'll find lodging there." Amara nodded faintly. She knew nothing of Red Willow but the name, yet his voice carried the weight of a promise. The road into town was not long, but long enough for her to see the change. Wild fields giving way to rail fences, scattered houses, and then the main street itself. Dusty, lined with a saloon, a general store, a blacksmith's forge. The American flag stirred above the small town hall, and the smell of smoked meat drifted from a cafe. When Nathaniel's horse and hers clattered to a halt, every eye turned. Talk fell quiet. Hands paused over scales and sacks. Laughter stopped short. Amara felt the heaviness settle. The Boston Negro girl. The words were not spoken, but they lived in every stare. Surprise, curiosity, a thread of doubt. Amara kept her back straight. fingers tugging at the borrowed dress Nathaniel had found for her. She had long since grown used to scrutiny, but in this unfamiliar town, the stares cut sharper. Nathaniel gave no explanation, no introduction. He simply dismounted, offering his hand. When her smaller hand slipped into his, steadying her descent, Amara caught sight of a knot of women outside the dry goods store whispering behind gloved hands. He led her to a brick house at the far end of the street. A wooden sign above the door read, Aldridge Boarding House. Nathaniel knocked. After a moment, the door swung open to reveal a stout woman past 50, silver hair bound tight at her neck. Her gaze swept Amara head to toe, eyes narrowing. "She needs a room," Nathaniel said quietly. "I thought you might take her." The woman studied Amara in silence. Then, without warning, she stepped back and said, "Come in." Inside, the air carried the scent of coffee and baked bread. Tables were set neat, white cloths folded crisp. The sight caught Amara in the throat. How long had it been since she had stood in a house that breathed warmth of its own? Mrs. Aldridge handed her an apron and pointed to the kitchen. "If you stay here, you work. I don't feed idlers." Amara nodded at once. "Yes, ma'am." So began her first days in Red Willow. She learned to cook from nothing, chopping vegetables, stoking the stove, baking bread. The first time she burned an entire batch, smoke rolling thick until children fled the hall laughing. The next, she spilled a pot of stew across the floor. Her hands, once used only to pen and paper, grew raw and red from knife and fire. Some nights she sat on her bed with her brow pressed to her arm, thinking she could not go on. But by dawn, she rose again, and when Mrs. Aldridge found her tending the stove before first light, the older woman gave a brief nod. It was small, but enough for Amara to know she was on the right path. Outside the kitchen, she learned to scrub and wash. She had never knelt at a washboard, never wrung water from cloth until her palms split. The water froze her fingers numb, but she endured. Piece by piece, the boarder's laundry came out clean beneath her clumsy, persistent hands. At first, the children of the town watched her with bold stares. They gathered at the windows, pointing and giggling. Some dared to call after her, "Boston girl, do you even know how to plow a field?" Then they scattered when Mrs. Aldridge's sharp voice chased them off. But over time they saw her patience, the way she scrubbed pans without complaint, the way she bent to gather trash in the yard. One afternoon, a small girl crept up and handed her a purple wildflower, whispering, "For you." Amara froze, then smiled, tucking it into her tangled curls. From that day, the children stopped their taunts and began calling her Miss Amara. Nathaniel came by often, bringing firewood, fixing a fence, or offering some excuse to ask after Mrs. Aldridge. His eyes never lingered long on Amara, yet she felt them all the same. He watched quietly, as if ready to step in should her strength falter. One evening, while she struggled at the table, flour streaking her cheeks, Amara glanced up and caught him framed in the window. He leaned against the post, sun at his back, face bronzed in the last gold of day. Their eyes met. Nathaniel, startled, turned quick, busying himself with the horse's reins. Amara's heart stumbled. She turned back to her work, kneading harder, though her hands shook. In Boston, every glance had been weighed, measuring her worth or stripping it bare. Here, in a town that whispered behind her back, there was one look that made her feel seen. Seen not as a token, nor a burden, but as a soul. And that, to Amara, was worth more than anything else. Since coming to Red Willow, Amara had believed she could only survive by enduring the housework under Mrs. Aldridge's roof. Yet little by little, the hunger to do more, to prove her worth by her own skill, pressed her toward another path. One morning, after sweeping the yard and scrubbing the table linens, Amara tied back her hair, slipped into a plain gray dress, and walked onto the main street. Across the road stood a small red brick building with a wooden sign, Red Willow Bank. Sunlight glinted on the glass windows, and inside she could see men withdrawing coin and exchanging gold. She drew a breath, her fingers clutching her dress. In Boston, she had learned letters, sums, and kept her father's ledgers. That knowledge had not faded. Though her skin and station would invite doubt, she knew she could manage. She stepped in. The air was cool, polished wood carrying the smell of ink. Behind the counter, the bank manager, a gray-haired man with spectacles perched low, looked up. Surprise flickered across his face. "What do you need?" His voice was stiff. Amara swallowed hard. "I came seeking work. I can write. I can keep accounts. In Boston, I tended my father's books." His brow furrowed, ready to dismiss her. But Amara quickly drew out a small notebook from her bag, the one keepsake she had carried west. She opened it on the counter. Neat rows of handwriting, careful sums, balanced tables. He skimmed a page. His brows eased, suspicion softening. Good hand. Numbers precise. After a pause, he set the book down, fingers tapping the counter. "Very well. 1 week's trial. If you manage, you stay." Amara bowed her head, gratitude trembling through her hands. In the days that followed, she sat behind the counter, her pen gliding across the page. The scratch of ink filled the room, numbers marching in orderly columns. At first, customers eyed her warily, whispering, "A Negro girl at the bank?" Yet when her figures proved swift and sure, her calm never faltered, the whispers waned. One afternoon, as she checked the ledgers, the manager came by and rested his hand briefly on the back of her chair. "Good," he said, short and plain, then walked away. Only a word, but for Amara, it was proof she was being seen. Outside the glass, Nathaniel happened by. He paused, eyes settling on her at the desk, lit by lamplight. The glow softened her face, half stern, half gentle. His chest tightened. When Amara looked up, catching his gaze, he turned at once, feigning with his reins as though he had never stopped. Amara bit her lip, her heart tripping fast. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge, the bank had emptied save for Amara, the manager, and one last customer. Hoofbeats sounded heavy outside, too hurried. Then the door burst wide. 2 men stormed in, scarves tied over their faces, pistols raised. "Nobody move!" The shout rang through the room. The manager froze, papers tumbling from his hands. Amara sat, still, heart hammering, yet her face calm. One man leveled his gun at her. "Money! Now!" Her eyes flicked to the street. Across the way, the blacksmith's forge still glowed. Jackson, the broad man who worked it, stood staring in. In a heartbeat, she knew only he could tip the balance. She drew a breath, let her pen slip to the floor. Bending to pick it up, she cast a quick glance toward Jackson. A single nod passed between them. Rising, she lifted the wooden cash box slowly. "Here," her voice steady, buying time. The robber stepped close, eyes locked on the box. That instant, Jackson charged in, swinging heavy tongs like a hammer against the man's arm. The pistol clattered to the floor. Amara pivoted, shoving the box hard into the other thief's face. Staggering, he reeled just as the sheriff burst in, revolver drawn. In a blink, it was over. The outlaws were pinned and bound. The manager collapsed in his chair, gasping. The sheriff turned to Amara, eyes alight. "Steady nerves, Miss Bennett. Not everyone holds fast in such a storm." He tipped his hat with respect. Amara bowed her head, pride welling strange and strong within her. At the door, Nathaniel had just arrived, reins gripped tight. He saw her standing there, dress dusted, eyes fierce, and halted. No longer the desperate girl of the storm, but a woman firm in the face of danger. His gaze met hers, longer than ever before, warmer. Proud. Amara felt her heart leap, heat flooding her cheeks. For the first time since Boston, she felt she belonged, not as one fleeing, but as part of this town. And in Nathaniel's eyes, she sensed her worth was no longer measured by the numbers she wrote, but by the courage she carried. News of Amara's courage during the bank robbery spread through Red Willow like fire through dry grass. Folks spoke of her in the saloon, at the forge, in the marketplace. The Boston Negro girl was no longer a clumsy outsider, but a woman who held steady under a gun barrel, quick-witted, fearless enough to earn the sheriff's respect. And with that change came new eyes upon her. Each day brought greetings, sometimes small gifts. One morning, a neat bundle of purple wildflowers lay at the Aldridge boarding house door. Another day, a sack of warm bread, steam still rising. Another, a basket of red apples. Even a hastily stitched handkerchief found its way into her window. In the evenings after the bank closed, Amara often noticed young men lingering on Main Street, pretending to chat, their glances always drifting toward her. They laughed. They tipped their hats, eager for a reason to speak. Amara was unaccustomed to such open attention. In Boston, every word of praise had been a snare, sweetened but laced with calculation. Her father, Albert Marchand, had treated her as a pawn for gain. Here in Red Willow, the clumsy gestures seemed plain, almost honest. They left her both unsettled and touched, her heart giving a startled beat at each shy glance sent her way. But Nathaniel was different. He watched from a distance, his dark eyes holding back a storm of their own. Each time a man handed Amara flowers or lingered too long, something stirred in him, strange, restless, unwelcome. Nathaniel had never been one for jealousy. He had lived too long alone, more at ease with silence than rivalry. Yet since Amara had stepped into his life, something primal woke within him, the urge to keep her beyond the reach of others. So he found reasons to ride into town more often. One day for salt, another for nails or new tack. Once to post a letter to some old friend. None urgent, yet always timed to coincide with the hour Amara left the bank. "Amara," he would say, his voice low, as though their meeting were chance. "The road's slick this evening. I'll walk with you." She looked up, surprised, but offered no protest. She walked beside him, hearing the steady strike of his boots on the dirt. His tall frame loomed at her side, a shield she had not asked for but could not deny. At times, she glanced sideways, catching his eyes bent toward her, silent, restrained, yet enough to send a tremor through her chest. The other men soon noticed. Each time Nathaniel appeared, they faltered and drifted off, unwilling to linger. In Red Willow, all knew who he was, a former soldier, a hard rancher, a man whose word carried weight. He needed no threats. His mere presence was enough. Amara began to understand. Each time Nathaniel left a bundle of firewood by her door, or a sack of beans or salt, she smiled faintly. At first she thought it simple kindness, neighborly concern, but as the gestures came steady, day after day, she knew it was no mere courtesy. One afternoon, Amara left the bank with a stack of ledgers in her arms. At the step, the young blacksmith's son appeared, holding out a bunch of purple wildflowers. His cheeks flushed as he stammered, "For you. I thought you'd like them." Amara hesitated, but before she could speak, a familiar figure stepped from the alley. Nathaniel. His eyes darkened at the sight. Without a word, he strode forward, taking the ledgers from her arms. His voice came rough, firm. "I'll carry these. Too far for you to bear the weight?" The blacksmith's boy stammered a goodbye and slipped away. Amara turned to Nathaniel, flustered. His face was stern, jaw tight, as if holding back words he would not release. "You don't have to," she began, then stopped. For in the silence that followed, she felt something else. A sense of safety, of rightness, as though his place at her side was natural. After that day, the steps outside the bank stood empty. Folk still greeted Amara kindly, but no more gifts were left. That space belonged to one man alone, Nathaniel. Amara did not resist, though she dared not fully accept. Warmth rose in her at his steady presence, but fear lingered in her mind. Fear of falling back into dependence, as in Boston. Her father and Albert Marchand had turned love and marriage into a trap. She had fled to escape the chains. Yet each time Nathaniel laid firewood by her door, or said quietly, "The wind's shifting tonight. Make sure the shutters hold," the defenses inside her softened a little more. That night, sitting in her room, Amara thought of it all. The townsfolk's clumsy offerings, their shy smiles, and Nathaniel's watchful eyes. In the dark, she knew her heart leaned toward one. Not for flowers nor gifts, but for patience, for steadiness, for the quiet weight of Nathaniel Cole's silence. In Red Willow, gossip traveled swift as wind. But this time, Amara found she did not care. Among all the eyes that followed her, she longed only for one gaze, the one that never strayed, whether from afar or near. That afternoon, Nathaniel stood across the street, half his face in the shade of the blacksmith's shop. He often came near the hour Amara left work, sometimes with the excuse of buying a few things, sometimes with none at all. It was enough just to see her step from the bank's wooden door. Today was no different. Yet Nathaniel froze when he saw Amara walking out beside a male colleague, a small ledger in her arms. They spoke, laughing over some shared thought. That smile, bright, unguarded, lighting her whole face, cut him sharper than any blade. He had never feared loss like this. His calloused hand clenched tight, nails pressing skin. A fierce urge rose within him. He wanted that smile for himself alone. When Amara parted from her colleague and turned toward the boarding house lane, Nathaniel strode after her. Without thought, he caught her wrist, pulling her into the narrow space between two buildings. Amara gasped, startled, her heart skipping. Her back pressed to the cold wood. Nathaniel stood close, his breath mingling with hers. His voice came rough, like wind through stone. "Could you keep that smile for me alone?" Time stopped. Amara's face flushed, her eyes wide, her heart hammered, breaking against her ribs. Nathaniel saw her confusion, realized his hand lingered too near. He let go at once, jaw tightening, stepping back. Amara bit her lip, silent. Yet when they stepped out into the street, her heart still trembled with his words. From that day, Nathaniel came more often. He gave no reasons, yet Amara knew each act was chosen. One morning, a neat bundle of firewood lay by her door. Another day, a sack of salt. Another, a new oil lamp, or a bundle of leather for Mrs. Aldridge to sew. "Do you have enough wood for the week?" His voice low, steady, never pressing, simply a care made habit. "The wind may shift tonight. Be sure the shutters hold. To find your way, keep the western peak in sight. It never fails, each brief word carried its own weight." With every visit, the space between them closed a little more. At first, Amara told herself it was only kindness, but when she caught his gaze resting longer on her face, or saw the careful way he set a sack of beans upon the table, she knew it was no mere courtesy. One evening, after rain, the street was slick with mud. Amara stepped from the bank, her skirt snagging at puddles. Nathaniel was waiting. He said nothing, only held out his hand. She hesitated, then placed her own in his to cross the mire. His hand was warm, rough, certain. She shivered, yet did not pull away. Their eyes met, and in his she saw more than concern, something unspoken, a silent confession. She turned quickly, hiding the smile that rose despite herself. Still, she kept her guard. Her heart stirred, but her mind warned. In Boston, she had been traded like property. Her father, Albert Marchand, had turned love into a chain. Was she stepping into another bond? That fear held her back. Each night, she sat by her window, watching lamplight flicker down the street, torn between her vow of independence and the warmth that surged whenever she remembered Nathaniel's clumsy jealousy. Time passed, and Red Willow came to see Amara as one of their own. Neighbors still greeted her kindly, but no more gifts lay waiting. All knew the tall figure who lingered near, steady as a mountain at her back. And whenever her eyes found his, Amara felt another crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Nathaniel never offered sweet words, never played at charm, yet in every act he revealed more than any confession could. Amara understood. Deep within, she began to admit, his presence no longer frightened her. It made her feel seen, respected, allowed to be herself. That night, she sat in her room, fingers brushing the bundle of purple flowers, now dried, upon her table. She thought of her first lonely weeks in Red Willow, the wary stares, and then Nathaniel's eyes in the storm. Now all was changed. In a town full of whispers, only one gaze could make her smile, and Amara knew her heart had chosen. That afternoon, the skies over Red Willow cleared after days of rain. Sunlight spilled golden across the prairie, laying a sheen of silk over the wild grass. Nathaniel stood before the bank, his sun-browned face carrying a quiet anticipation. "Amara," he said, voice calm yet weighted, eyes steady and deep. "If you're willing, today, come to the ranch. There's something I want to show you." Amara hesitated, then nodded. She had heard of Lone Creek, yet had never set foot there. In her heart, she knew this was no idle invitation. The ride took near an hour. Amara sat behind Nathaniel, her dress brushing in the wind, the scent of damp earth rising from the fields. At last, a broad view opened before her, The stout wooden cabin, fences circling pasture, horses whinnying at their master's return. But Nathaniel rode past, guiding across meadows bright with wildflowers, until the murmur of water reached her ears. A stream curved clear around the foot of a hill, sky mirrored in its glassy surface. Moss lay thick upon the stones. Amara bent, cupped her hands, splashed her face. The cool water startled a laugh from her lips, bright and unguarded. Nathaniel watched, silent. He seldom smiled, but in that moment, his mouth curved faintly, caught by the freedom in her laughter. They sat upon a flat stone by the bank. At first they spoke of small things, crops, horses, the work at the bank, but the stillness pressed them deeper. "I enlisted at 17, Nathaniel said, gaze cast far. Gettysburg. I lost much there. Friends, youth, and the hope that life might be simpler after war." Amara listened, her hand tightening on her lap. In his eyes, she saw scars that time had not healed, pain buried but never gone. "As for me," her voice faltered, "I ran the night before my wedding. My father said it would save the family, but to me it was a prison. Albert Marchand, he never wanted a wife. He wanted a prize to display." The stream whispered between them. Nathaniel turned, his eyes meeting hers. In that stillness they saw the truth. Two lives, so different in shape, bound by the same wounds, both fleeing the chains of their past. The world hushed. Only the rustle of grass and the breath of young clover lingered. Amara lifted her gaze, sunlight striking Nathaniel's features, carved sharp in gold. A strange urging rose, stronger than her doubts. She leaned close and pressed her lips to his cheek. Nathaniel stiffened, shoulders drawn tight, eyes wide. Amara faltered, half ready to pull back. But then he turned, closing the distance. Their mouths met. It was not fierce nor hurried. Slow, careful, as if both stepped tentative into new ground. And in that slowness lay the tremor of something true. Amara felt warmth flood through her, washing out the dread of marriage that had haunted her. Here was no claim, no possession, only the gentleness of sharing. Nathaniel, long resigned to solitude, shook under its weight. He had thought his life bound forever to horses, grass, and winters without end. Yet in this moment, with her lips upon his, an old longing stirred, a yearning to trust, to keep, to love. When they parted, both drew breath unsteady. Amara lowered her face, cheeks burning, hands clutching her skirt. Nathaniel hesitated, then smiled, rare, bright as sun after storm. "I did not think you would." His voice rough, trembling. Amara whispered, near to herself, "Nor did I think I could be so brave." Evening crept across the meadow, the light softening into violet. They sat side by side, silent, one brush of hands enough to speak all else. When Nathaniel lifted Amara onto the horse for the ride home, his hand lingered upon hers. This time she did not draw away. She let it remain, warmth sinking deep into her palm, into her heart. That night, in her room, Amara sat by the window, moonlight silvering the rooftops. In her mind replayed the kiss by the stream. Nathaniel's eyes softened, and the peace it had brought. No, this was not a chain. This was a wing, and for the first time since fleeing Boston, Amara believed love could be freedom. That evening, Nathaniel waited once more outside the bank. as had become his habit. The last light of day lingered on the glass panes, gilding them in gold, but black clouds gathered over the far ridge, warning of rain. "Let me walk you home," Nathaniel said softly as Amara stepped out, arms full of ledgers. She nodded. They walked side by side toward Mrs. Aldridge's boarding house. At first, their steps matched in salons, their talk no more than short remarks on the day's work. But the wind rose, and soon the sky opened. Rain poured heavy, blurring the whole town in sheets of silver. Within breaths they were soaked through. Amara's dress clung to her skin, curls plastered against her neck. Nathaniel pulled her under the eaves of a house, but the storm drove at them still. "Run!" Amara cried, eyes alight beneath the rain. They laughed as they dashed through the downpour, reaching the boarding house door in gasping breaths. Water dripped onto the floorboards, puddling beneath them. Amara swept her hair back, her skin shining dark beneath the glow of lamplight. Nathaniel stood still, caught by the sight. "Come in," she murmured, cheeks flushed with cold and something unnamed. The chill of wet cloth made her shiver. She reached for a towel near the hearth and handed it to him. He took it, but draped it over her shoulders first. "You're colder than I am," he said, voice low and steady. Amara met his eyes, breath still unsteady, the air thick with rain and wood smoke. Nathaniel bent to feed the fire, scarred hands careful in stacking each log. Amara watched, and a strange warmth stirred. This was no fear as in Boston, but the safety of a shelter. The room grew warmer, yet her damp clothes left her trembling. She stepped behind the screen with a plain dress in hand. Fabric whispered as she shed the soaked gown, her dark skin catching faint light from the candle. Her heart raced, caught between worry and something new. When she returned, she froze. Nathaniel stood by the fire, shirt stripped, hanging it to dry. His broad back bore pale scars, tokens of war and labor. Amara flushed deep, her chest tight. She turned quickly, sitting at the bed's edge, fingers clenched to still her nerves. Nathaniel noticed, his gaze softening. He wrapped a blanket across his shoulders, then walked toward her, boots tapping slow, as though he wished not to startle her. He knelt at her feet. Firelight climbed his weathered face, making his eyes seem darker, deeper. He reached for her hand, rough palm closing gentle around her fingers. "Amara." His voice hushed, shaking like the rain outside. "Allow me to love you in the way you deserve." She looked down, eyes swimming. No one had ever asked. No one had ever given her choice. All her life, decisions had been forced upon her. Now, for the first time, a man knelt, asking leave to love. Her chest tightened, then softened. A tear brimmed. Quietly she whispered, firm though trembling, "I allow it." He did not rush. His hand pressed lightly, a reminder, "I am here. You may stop me at any time." "Do you know," Nathaniel said with a rough laugh, "I never thought I'd have a night like this." Amara's lips quivered into a smile. "Nor did I ever think I would be chosen. Before, everything was a command. Until you—" They held each other's gaze, letting silence speak what words could not. Nathaniel rose, carefully lifting the damp cloth from her shoulders, folding it aside. His touch made her shiver, not from cold, but from the truth of it. He freed the pins from her curls until her hair fell loose. soft across her shoulders. Amara's heart pounded, but she felt his patience in every motion. No demand, only reverence, as if she were treasure. When his hands brushed the edge of her dress, she caught the fabric. He paused, eyes searching hers. "We can stop here," he whispered, voice mingling with the storm. "I will not ask what you are not ready to give." A warmth surged through her. She released the cloth, drawing breath. "I trust you." The candlelight touched her skin, smooth and dark. Nathaniel stilled, etching the sight in his memory. Yet his gaze bore no claim, only wonder, only gratitude. He bent, kissing her brow, then her cheek, then her lips. The kiss was not fierce but slow, tender as warmth spreading in winter. Amara closed her eyes, letting herself dissolve into it, shedding the last shadow of Boston's hold. They lay together, at first only a touch. Amara pressed her ear to his chest, hearing the steady drum of his heart. His hand traced her arm with care, every motion a question. "Do you wish this?" Amara nodded, whispering, "I do, but in our way." The night held no haste. Barriers fell, not by force but consent. Amara discovered the gentleness beneath his strength. Nathaniel found in her a trust he had never been given. Awkwardness, even pain, gave way to the quiet murmur of his promise. "I'll stop if you ask." She clung to him, answering through tears, "Don't stop." "I'm not afraid." And so, beneath the trembling light of candles and the drum of rain, they became one, not bound by chains of the past, but by the freedom of choice. When it was done, Nathaniel drew her close against his chest. She rested there, soothed by the sure beat of his heart. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, worry in his face. Amara smiled faintly, kissing his jaw. "No, I only feel happy." Her tears now shone not with fear, but with release. "In Boston, I thought love a chain," she whispered. "But here with you, I know it is a wing." Nathaniel closed his eyes, holding her tight. "I promise you will always be free, but that freedom, let me share it for all our days." Amara nodded, pressing her face into his chest. That night, they slept in each other's arms, their rest as light as grass stirred in wind, as if the world beyond no longer mattered. Morning light slipped through the cracks in the shutters, laying pale gold across the wooden floor. Amara stirred, for a breath unsure if the night before had been dream or truth. But the warmth beside her, the steady rise and fall of breath, and the strong arm draped around her, answered without words. Nathaniel still slept, his face softened in rest, stripped of the stern edge it wore by day. Amara lay still, watching the quiet lines of him, the long lashes, the faint scar at his jaw, the lips parted as though he whispered into some dream. A swell of feeling rose within her. For the first time in her life, she was not the pawn of another's choosing, not the future bride in a bargain. Last night, she had been chosen, and she had chosen as well. She shifted slightly, careful not to wake him. But Nathaniel's eyes opened at once as though he had sensed her. The deep blue of them caught hers, no words needed, and her heart stumbled at the look they shared. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," she replied, her cheeks warming. They laughed together, awkward and shy, as two souls learning the first notes of love. Neither moved to break the circle of arms, letting the peace stretch on. At last, Nathaniel sat up, brushing a hand through Amara's tumbled hair. "I should go before the town begins its talk," he said, half in jest, half in truth. Amara lowered her eyes, lips pressing together, yet happiness glimmered in her gaze. She knew he was right, though she wished the parting did not have to come. He pulled on the shirt dried by the fire, slung his pack over his shoulder. At the doorway, their hands clasped long, unwilling to let go. No vows were spoken, yet both felt the unseen bond draw tight between them. Once morning had meant little to Amara, a day like any other, a return to labor. But this morning was different. It marked a new course lit by trust and a love just begun. Outside, the world gleamed fresh from rain. Sunlight played on puddles, flashing back the blue of the sky. Nathaniel paused at the steps just as Mrs. Aldridge opened her door below. She usually knocked at Amara's room by now, calling her to help with chores. But this morning she did not. She carried a basket of fresh bread, her keen eyes resting on the two of them. Nathaniel dipped his head politely. "Morning, Mrs. Aldridge." She did not answer right away. The corners of her mouth lifted in a slow smile, as though she already knew the truth without being told. "Fine weather today," she said, words simple yet pointed. Amara flushed, bowing her head, and Nathaniel shifted, uneasy. But in the older woman's look there was no judgment, only understanding, with a touch of quiet mirth. "Best keep your strength for the ranch," Mrs. Aldridge added, voice calm. "The storm last night must have left plenty to mend." Nathaniel nodded, the tips of his ears reddening. He turned to Amara, squeezing her hand once more before releasing it. She stood in the doorway, watching him walk away down the rain-damp street. Her heart beat fast, not with fear as when she first came to Red Willow, but with the quick rhythm of love taking root. Mrs. Aldridge set her basket on the porch rail, then looked at Amara with a smile warm and sly. "Seems I won't need to knock at your door so early anymore." Amara laughed, hiding her face, her cheeks aflame. "Mrs. Aldridge, I'm old, child, not blind." The woman shook her head, eyes shining with fondness. "Just remember, you deserve happiness." Don't forget that Amara stilled, then nodded, her chest filling with gratitude. That day she worked as always, sweeping floors, carrying trays, balancing sums. Yet her steps felt lighter, her smile easier. Each time she recalled Nathaniel's eyes at parting, her heart fluttered as though caught by wind. A new day had begun, and for Amara, it was more than a day. It was proof she had found where she belonged, not in some grand house in Boston, but in the heart of a man who had chosen her, not from duty, but for who she truly was. The summer night lay heavy and close when Red Willow, quiet by habit, broke into shouts and alarm. The town bell clanged wild, voices rose urgent in the dark. Amara, seated with Mrs. Aldridge mending clothes, saw sudden red light flicker through the window. "Hoffman's barn! It's burning!" A man's cry split the night. Amara seized a shawl and ran out with the others. Smoke rolled thick from the far end of town, the stench of burning timber biting her lungs, stinging her eyes. She pushed forward, skirts catching at her heels, yet never slowed. The sight wrenched her heart. The Hoffman barn was ablaze, beams snapping under the roar of fire. Horses screamed within, hooves pounding desperate against their stalls. Buckets passed hand to hand from the well, but Flame leapt higher, hungrier. Through the haze she caught Nathaniel's shape. Firelight carved his face, sweat pouring as he hurled bucket after bucket. Without pause, he and others forced their way inside, forcing the frightened animals out. Each time he vanished into the glow, Amara held her breath. Each time he emerged again, her chest loosened. She threw herself into helping the women, guiding smoke-choked men outside, clutching the Hoffman boy as he coughed and gasped, whispering comfort till his breathing steadied. When Mrs. Hoffman collapsed, Amara knelt, brushing soot from her hair, murmuring, "You will not be left behind." Hours passed before the fire broke. A section of the barn gave way in a thunderous crash. The townsfolk sagged where they stood, streaked with ash and sweat. The horses lived, but the barn, Hoffman's livelihood, lay in ruin. Old Hoffman sank to his knees, voice breaking. "Everything's gone. Insurance won't rebuild this. We're finished." A heavy silence fell. All knew what it meant. Without the barn, there'd be no trade, no teams for hauling freight. Red Willow itself would stagger. Amara looked at him, and in his despair she saw Boston again. Her father's face when ruin loomed, the bargain he struck, the marriage he forced. The memory burned bitter. She stepped forward, voice steady, carrying through the smoke. Red Willow Bank can lend against what land remains. With that, the Hoffmans can rebuild. Without it, the loss is not theirs alone. It will cripple us all. Every eye turned toward her, the black woman from Boston, still a stranger in many minds. She pressed on, strong. We cannot let one family fall. Their barn serves not only them, but every soul in this town. If it goes, Red Willow pays the price, murmurs rippled, some nodding, some doubtful. Then Sheriff Collins, stern and seldom moved, spoke firm. "She's right. That barn feeds more than Hoffman's. It feeds us all. If the bank helps, this town stands steadier." His words swayed the crowd. Mr. Donovan, the bank manager with graying hair, stepped from the shadows. He studied Amara, then gave a slow nod. "Come morning, I'll review the loan." "Miss Bennett, you see farther than many here tonight." A breath of relief passed through the people. Hoffman lifted his head, eyes rimmed red but shining faint with hope. "Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you, Miss Bennett." Amara smiled, the weight on her chest easing. From the edge of the crowd, Nathaniel watched. His face blackened with soot, sweat cutting tracks down his jaw, yet his eyes burned with something deeper than respect. That night, he saw more than courage. He saw the partner his heart had already chosen. When the crowd thinned, Nathaniel came to her. He laid a calloused hand on her shoulder, a grip firm yet tender. In his deep blue gaze shone pride, gratitude, and love no longer hidden. "You saved the town tonight." His voice rasped from smoke and exhaustion. Amara lifted her eyes, meeting his. Her heart quivered but warmed under the weight of his look. She shook her head. "No. We did this, together, yet deep within she knew." When Nathaniel's hand settled on her shoulder, every last wall she'd built fell away. In his eyes she was no pawn, no ornament. She was seen. She was loved. And that was something she had never or believed she might have. Evening settled over Lone Creek, autumn wind carrying the faint sweetness of dry leaves and wild grass. Amara had no thought that tonight her life would change. Nathaniel came as usual to meet her after the bank, but his voice was softer than most days. "If you've time, come to the ranch." there's something I'd like to show you." Surprise flickered in her eyes, yet the steadiness in his made refusal impossible. When the horse halted before the cabin, Amara stopped short. The porch, plain wood she knew well, now glowed with paper lanterns, their golden light drifting like fireflies across the wind. On the long table a white cloth lay smooth, set with roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and a fresh apple pie still steaming. "You," Amara breathed, her hand rising to her mouth. Nathaniel rubbed the back of his neck, awkward as a younger man. "It's nothing grand. I only wanted tonight to be different." They sat together, the lantern light dancing across their faces. Nathaniel spoke little, but his eyes lingered longer, deeper. Amara's laughter joined the rustle of leaves, a music neither wished to end. After the meal, Nathaniel rose and disappeared into the cabin. When he returned, he held a worn velvet box. He sank to one knee before her, lantern flame sharpening the lines of his face, strong, yet trembling. "Amara Bennett," his voice rough, carrying like it carved the night. "From the moment I found you in the storm, I knew my life would not be the same. You've given me faith, gentleness, and hope. I have little to offer, only my love, this home, and the ring my mother once wore. But I want you to know, nothing means more than to call you wife. Will you marry me?" In his palm lay a thin gold band, set with a single pearl, plain but shining in its honesty. Tears slipped down Amara's face. Boston fell away. The cold banquets, Edmund's lifeless touch. Here, before this man, she was no longer a token in some bargain. She was herself. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Nathaniel, I will." Relief lit his face, a smile rare as sunrise, warm and wide. The ring slid upon her finger, fitting as though fate itself had shaped it. Nathaniel rose, drawing her into his arms, sealing the vow with a kiss deep and steady, a promise carved into forever. Word swept quickly through Red Willow. Days later, the wedding filled the little wooden church. The town gathered, Mrs. Aldridge, Mr. Donovan, even the children who once teased her, now all offering blessing. Amara wore a plain white dress crowned with wildflowers. Nathaniel stood at the end of the aisle, eyes alight as she came to him. The vows echoed beneath the rafters. When Amara looked into Nathaniel's gaze, she saw no chains. Only a door opened wide. Their kiss after the pledge brought cheers that rolled across the prairie. That night, Nathaniel carried her across the threshold of the cabin, now their home. Fire crackled, casting gold upon her curls. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. Once she had feared this night, but with Nathaniel's hand closing gently over hers, the fear dissolved. "Welcome home, my wife," he whispered. What passed between them was not only love in body, but faith in soul. For the first time, Amara knew she would never need to flee again. In Nathaniel's arms, she had found freedom. Years later, Lone Creek Ranch rang with children's laughter. Nathaniel, shoulders bent from years in the saddle, still kept a bright eye over his herd. Amara tended the garden, taught their children to read on the porch. One evening, as the sun burned red behind the mountains, Amara sat watching the little ones chase through the horses. Her heart brimmed full. Nathaniel came beside her, laying his hand upon her shoulder, no words spoken. This was their legacy, not gold, not rank, but a home built of trust and choice. From the girl who once fled Boston's chains, Amara had found her place, within the arms of a man who honored her, who let her be wholly herself. And the Wyoming prairie, once only grass and wind, now carried the music of children's laughter, a testament that love, chosen true, can leave a legacy stronger than time. Friends, is it not the hope of every heart to find such love? Simple, steadfast, not binding but sheltering. If this story stirred some memory in you, of a person, a season, or a silence once held dear, share it with us in the comments below. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to journey on with us in these Wild West love stories. For who knows, in the next tale you may find a piece of your own heart waiting there.